Ashe, Ashe and Grand Rising, a grand day to you all once again, my fellow humans. And to be even more specific, not to AI, but Ashe and Grand Rising, a grand day to you all, my fellow natural, native, and earthly humans. And welcome to this part 2 of this another of my thought-provoking presentations titled Retirement Plan for People 40 to 75. Another perspective, the Mystic Philosopher. And yes, my dear beloved people, let me again remind you that it is high time for reason. It is high time first for thinking, then for reason and for reasoning. And if you haven't yet watched part 1, I humbly ask that you please do so now before you watch this part 2. So I ended part 1 by reminding you that from my perspective, we are all in this thing together. Like it or not, my dear beloved people, we are all imprisoned here. We are all imprisoned here. And the persons named in part 1, I was trying to remember a gentleman's name. The person's name that I was trying to remember is Alex Jones from the Alex Jones Show, who years ago I also once heard him said that this is a prison planet. I remember hearing Alex Jones Show way back sometimes ago talking about a prison planet. This is a prison planet. We are all captured, from my perspective, we are all captured and trapped here on a prison planet. Earth is a prison planet. I agree with Alex Jones with that, if you understand. In fact, one of his Alex Jones websites is called what? prisonplanet.com. And the fact is that we are all slaves. In other words, for slaves is servants. They just pretty it up. We are all slaves, aka servants in the labor force, aka forced labor. Yes, here. Labor force, forced labor. We talk about labor force. It turns out when you get what? Forced labor. It's not natural. It's not a natural thing. And it does not matter what capacity we are serving in, or it doesn't matter what capacity we are slaving or laboring in or working in, be it so-called professional or not. Some of us show off with our big jobs and try to look down on other people and treat other people as they are insignificant. But we are all in this thing together. It doesn't matter whether you're a professional or not, be it a professional such as a teacher, a doctor, a police officer, a judge, engineer, politician, astrophysicist, preacher, scientist, supervisor. You name it or you name them, the fact still remains that we are all prisoners here. We are all in prison here. We are all servants, aka slaves, in this thing together, right here. We are all forced to work. And as the saying goes, by the sweat of our brow, so shall we eat bread. However, for those of us, and this is something I was trying to say in the last part of part 1, that it didn't come out as how I intended to say. Somehow I slipped up there, but let me clarify that now. However, for those of us that are in the know, we know that it is not so. By the sweat of your brow shall we eat bread. It is not natural. It's not a natural thing, but more on that at another time. I spoke on that before and someplace else. I will speak on it again. No doubt I will revisit it sometime in the future. Stay tuned. And so here in part 2, I will continue where I left off in part one asking some very pertinent questions, or questions that I consider to be pertinent. As I continue to delve into their trickery and slavery system and its concept of retirement. We're going to delve into this thing called retirement as we go along, even more, asking more questions and sharing more perspectives. A reality check too. Now, question two, I dealt with question one. Let's start again, continue with question two. When do you plan to retire? Have you asked yourself that question? When do you plan to retire? When are you planning to retire? Question three, is it the company that you're working for, the job that you're in? Is it the company that will retire you? Or is it life that will have to retire you? Meaning, will you have to take sick or fall in sick or drop dead on the job or on the way to the job or from the job to retire? Question number four, do you have a retirement plan? Question number five, do you have a retirement plan that will and that can take care of all your needs should you live long enough to retire? And question number six, what is the Mystic Philosopher's suggestion for a workable alternative, an affordable retirement plan for those to whom it may concern? We're going to be dealing with all of these questions. Now, as I continue, let's deal with the question first. What is a retirement plan? But even before I answer the question, what is a retirement plan? Please let me first answer the question, what is retirement? A lot of people never thought seriously about this thing called retirement. What is a plan? We talk about the plan, but let's deal with retirement first. Let's look at retirement first. Now, when we were young, like people like myself, who's retired, when we were young, for those of us that can still remember, people like myself that may be able to still remember those days when we were young, right? And also for most young people today, we were taught and also led to believe that what? Retirement will be the best days of our lives. Who remember that? We were taught that retirement is, or that retirement will be the best thing that can happen to us. And retirement is the best thing that will ever happen to us. So can you remember? I remember. We were taught that we must put into the system a minimum of what? 40 to 50 years of our lives. That we must put into the system, 40 to 50 years of our life, into the system's workforce. Listen to the word, workforce. And now we know what the system was and is. Now we know that workforce in all practical reality is what? Force work, aka we were forced and are forced to work. And that it was and that it is what? Forced labor. They tell us, but we're just not thinking, we're not evaluating things. So we were taught to put 40 to 45 years of hard work, aka hard labor. When they send people to prison and say they give them hard labor. Yes, we must put in 40 to 45 years of hard work and hard labor into the system, which is, from my perspective, the real and true labor camp. And 40 to 45 years into serving what? Our family and our country. That is what we're taught. We're doing it for our family and our country. And that when we reach the age, this is what we were taught, that when we reach the age of 60 to 65, we can retire, or we will retire and live a wonderful life thereafter. That we will live our best life. Was am I making things up here? Somebody please correct me. I look forward to hear from you. Your comments and your perspective, they are all encouraged. Yes, that we will live. This is what we're taught. That when we retire, we will live a wonderful life. That we will live our best life. That we will live a glorious life. A life of wonder and splendor. A life of bliss under a golden arch or under the golden arch somewhere. Isn't that what we were taught? I remember. Some of us that were lucky enough, and some of us that are lucky enough to have survived and made it this far, have realized and are now realizing that the system's ideology and indoctrination of putting in 40 to 45 years into its labor force and then retire and live happily ever after is false. Now we're realizing that this ideology that we were taught and led to believe were and still is one of the biggest lies from the pit of hell. And from my perspective, no one today, young or old, that is in his or her right mind and is thinking independently would accept this doctrine as being truthful or as being sensible. To believe that the best days of our lives is when we are a few steps away from the grave. It's not, or if not, having 1 foot and a half of our body, 1 foot in the grave, and 1 foot along with half of our body in the grave. To believe that those are the best days of our lives, or will be the best days of our lives, and are the best days of our lives, in my opinion, from my perspective, is not at all wise. In fact, from my perspective, according to the Adamic Race History and Holy Book, aka the Christian Holy Bible, and if my interpretation of it is at all correct, then not even the God, aka the Christian God, not even that God, the Christian God of the Christian Holy Bible, have much use for it has much use for his own, for those people, if any whatsoever. For all retired people here on earth, they have no much use for them on here on earth. Your usefulness is over once you retire and reach that age. Your usefulness here is over. I just saw the thing set, like it or not. I find out now, so I give my perspective. Maybe he can, or maybe he will have use for them who believe in him and who believe in the Christian God and the Christian Bible, maybe, and believe in going to heaven. Maybe he will have use for them in heaven, where he supposedly dwelled. But the evidence shows not here, and I have no use for them here on earth. Because as far as I can see, when he called old people, he called them home. I can remember even hearing back in the day, going to church back in the day, and hearing my mom and other older folks singing the song, "Come home, come home. All he who are weary, come home." I'm not making it up. The song go like that. And why come home? Because it's over for them here, or it's over, right? It's over for those who believe in going to that place. It's over for them here. Their best or our best days are gone, along with our youth. We have become weak, or we are becoming weak and feeble once we are old and get retired. We have become sick, or we are becoming sickly, and even our memory starts to fade. That's a fact. We have become sick, and we are becoming sickly once we reach old age, retirement age, and even our memory fade. Thus, we can't do work effectively and efficiently anymore. I mean, not as much as I try to be as active and as agile as possible. The fact is that sometimes I feel some aches and pains, but I've never felt these aches and pains before. And I'm reminded that it comes with the territory, old age. Like it or not, I just saw the thing said. But when he called young people, well, according to the Bible, my interpretation of it, when the God of the Bible called young people, it is because they are young and strong. One scripture I think said, young men I call upon you because you are what? Strong. And from my perspective, that is why a lot of old retirees, old folks, and people that are supposed to retire, old folks that are literally steps away from going home, and some are even being called home, but because of fear. There are a lot of people that are being called home, but they're hanging on, they don't even want the plug pull. They don't even want to let go. They're still hanging on here because of fear and because of the uncertainty or whatever their reason, because they never really live here and never really full joy the time which is equal to life they had. Now when it's time to go home, they're hanging on. They don't want to let go. Yes, even when they are being called home by be it their ancestors or be it their God. But because of fear and also in some cases jealousy and envy, they are standing in the way of young people. There are a lot of old folks, a lot of we that are standing in the way of young people, preventing them. Yes, holding on. No wonder one scripture said, blessed is or happy is the one that stand not in the way of a sinner. I say happy is the one that stand, the old folks that is not standing in the way of young people and allowing them to live their lives. Yes, you can see some of us, or you can see some old folks in government. They can't even talk, but they're hanging on to power to rule over the youths. You see them in government. You see them in positions of employment. You see them in churches. Some call themselves elders, bishops, and all of that. But they hang on to power. Right? We see them in all sorts of religious organizations and in all forms of positions of power, not wanting or not willing to let go or to hand over power to the youths in order for them to chart their course, in order for the youths to chart their own course in this thing that we call life. Yes. And one of the reasons I said before, because most of us never live. Yes, we've just been slaving. And I would be remiss if I did not mention the fact that it is also rumored that the Canadian government is looking to raise the retirement age from 65 to 67. So even though most people put in 40 to 50 years, they still want 2 more years. Why? Because people like myself and others who try to do what is right to stay a little bit healthy say, no, I can't work him out. They were working us to death and taking every juice out of the cane. Yes. They're putting on 2 more years, so 67 years. From 65 to 67. The slave master is planning to keep us on the slave plantation while working in the fields much longer. So for example, if we started working between age, let's say 16 to 18, and we are able to successfully retire at age 65, by my calculation, we would have put in a minimum of 44 to 49 years of our lives into the workforce, aka the labor force, or the forced labor. If we enter, by my calculation, if we enter the labor force, aka the forced labor, or the labor camp between, let's say, age 20 to age 25, after completing some form of tertiary training in some form of tertiary institution, and we're successful to retire at age 60 to 65, then according to my calculation, we would have put in 40 to 45 years of our lives into what? The workforce, aka the forced labor. Now I ask that you please notice that I have not even made mention of the years of preparation for servitude, aka slavery, preparation for slavery on the plantation, aka on the labor force or in the labor force, in the forced labor. And I'm talking about the kindergarten age, which is in some cases from age 3, and in some other cases age 4 to 5. Then from that preparation, to middle school or primary school, then to high school, and then to college and university. Those are what I, the Mystic Philosopher, also call the apprenticeship years. This is a serious thing. Let me also remind you that those were the best days of our lives. Those 44 to 49 or 40 to 45 years were and are the best days of our lives. And once gone, as I mentioned in part 1, they're gone forever. Let me remind you, in part 1, I told you that from my perspective, time is equal to life and life is equal to time, and that there are only 3 things that I can think of that we can do with our time, or that we can do with our life. 1, we can spend it or expend it. And 2, we can waste it. And 3, we can invest it. And I told you that once we expend, waste, or invest our lives or our time, we can never get, under no circumstances, we can never get it back. We can never get not even a moment of our time or of our life back. It is gone forever. So we were taught and led to believe that if or when we loyally, faithfully, patriotically, and obediently put in the time which is equal to what? Our life into the labor force, aka into the forced labor, then we will reap the just rewards, aka the fruits of our labor. And so, for most of us, if not almost all of us, as soon as we finish our schooling, which, by the way, schooling is just another word for education, training, to be good and efficient servants, aka good and efficient slaves. That's what schooling is all about. And sometimes even before we complete our education, before we have completed our education and join the workforce, aka the forced labor, all we are thinking about is what? Retirement. All we are thinking about is freedom, because we realize, consciously or unconsciously, that we are trapped. It is a well-known and admittable fact that slaves any and everywhere are always looking what? They are always looking and hoping to be free. We make statements like, I can't wait to retire. I want to get out of this system. aka I want to get out of the labor force and the forced labor. I am looking forward to my retirement. I wish that I could get an early retirement. I can't wait to retire and go and live my life the way I would like to live it, etc. But that is almost at the end of our days when we do get out. And by the way, did you all know that for decades, health experts believe that weekday mornings, especially Mondays, were prime time for unexpected deaths and sudden cardiac arrest? Do you know that? Yes, most of these things happen on weekdays, early mornings, or early grand rising, if you will. And the reason they predicted was due to the sudden surge of a stress hormone, how do you pronounce that? Yeah, hormone called cortisol. That is a hormone that we experience upon waking up. And especially when we know and realize that we have to go back on the slave plantation, we have to go back to the labor force, and sometimes to face some of the very harsh, horrible, miserable, haunting, wicked, and terrorizing slave masters. We call them bosses. And you know what bosses stand for. WSOB. But quite regrettable. What we were not taught and what most of us did not take the time to find out is the fact that what we were taught and what we are being taught today about retirement was and is all a lie, a great big lie. That we were and that we are all being deceived. We never know that. We never figure that out. We were taught, and our children and young people today are being taught that if we serve the system and all the aforementioned, then they, the system, and all the aforementioned will serve us in our retirement. And every little thing is going to be all right. So no need to worry. For every little thing is going to be all right. Just trust and obey. For there is no other way. But that, from my perspective, was and is all a lie. However, I must admit that a lot of young people today are finding out the truth and are learning the truth. And a lot of them are far smarter than us, especially when we were young like them and have figured out, they are figuring out and have figured out and are figuring out the lie about the slavery system and retirement that we have been taught. By the way, this is going to be the end of part 2. So I ask you to please join me in part 3 for the continuation of this presentation, Retirement Plan for People 40 to 75, under the perspective, the Mystic Philosopher. In the meantime and between time, in your becoming, I will that you become more and more and not less, aka be less. For I am the Mystic Philosopher. Ashe, 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 I say.